Once upon a tall tale.
Once Upon a Tall Tale. Season 0, Episode 10. The Widow's Well by Morgan Olson. Now the way it was told to me, and I had it from my mother, who had it from a woman who carried eggs out to that farm every second Thursday for 11 years, so you may weigh the distance yourself. Katrina McAuley was 3 miles from home when she smelled the smoke. Not cook fire smoke. Any woman who has kept a stove knows the difference in half a breath. This was the flat, wrong smell of a fire lit by hands that didn't care what they burned. She put her heels to the mule and came up over the ridge road, and there below her was her own farm, with 7 strange men spread across it like spilled grain. Horses tied to her fence. Rifles leaned where rifles shouldn't be. 2 men at her well, with the bucket up, drinking long and careless, letting good water run into the dirt, and smoke rising from her own chimney, which meant one of them was in her house. She sat the mule a while and looked at it. That was her way, they say. She was a small woman, not much over 5 feet in her boots, and she had learned early that a small woman who moves fast gets treated one way, and a small woman who moves slow and looks hard gets treated another. You'll want to know who she was, so I'll tell you quick, the way it was told to me. Widowed 3 years. Her man Ewan underground so hard, they'd needed pickaxes to open it for him. The drought had come the same season he died, and folks in the valley like to say his dying had cracked the sky. Folks will braid any 2 sorrows into one rope. The old women knew better. Droughts come out of the mountains, out of some old argument between the stone and the sun, and no widow's grief has ever stopped rain that meant to fall. Her people were island Scots, 2 generations off the boats from the Hebrides, and she'd had a grandmother who talked to wells. I mean that plainly. Back in the old country there are wells folk tie cloth to and speak at, and there is a lady of those wells, older than the churches, and I won't say her name out loud in a kitchen because my own grandmother wouldn't, but Katrina knew it. That knowledge came over the water with her family, packed quiet under the wool and the Bibles. Her well had never failed. 3 years of drought, and every other well in the valley gone to mud, and hers still gave. Less than before. She drew light and let it rest. But it gave. She'd come to think of it the way you think of an old dog. It knew her step. It knew her voice. So she rode down to her own gate, and the man who ran that pack of 7, Dunmore, pale-eyed, beard gone past neglect into philosophy, looked up from her bucket and did not put it down. "That is my well," she said, "and my water." "Country like this," he said, "a well is a public good. The law says otherwise." Sheriff Donahue had gone missing the night before. There on the Tuesday, gone by the Wednesday, his horse in the stable and his hat on its peg. Nobody in that valley ever learned what became of him. Some tellings say the 7 had a hand in it. I don't know. The woman who told my mother didn't know. It stays wrong, and there is no reason to believe he just left for no reason. Dunmore knew it, though. You could hear it under his voice. "Seems it's just you and the law, Mrs. McAuley," he said, "and the law is not doing much writing today." She looked at the 7 of them. 7 men, 7 rifles, 7 horses that would want watering by dark. And then she said the thing the whole story turns on, said it pleasant as church. "Then I suppose you'll be staying for supper." She fed them that night. That bought her the seeing of them. Dunmore was the gravity, and the rest just orbited. There was a boy among them, barely 20, who ate like he was apologizing for it, and looked to Dunmore before he so much as salted his beans. There was a big one called Peck, scar across his nose, who said nothing and watched everything, and was plainly proud of both. The other 4 were the usual sort that trails after a man like Dunmore. Mean when it's offered to them, idle otherwise. When they'd bedded down, she went out the back of her own house in the dark, no lantern, because a woman knows her own ground blind. She leaned over the well and she felt its cold breath come up. That was real mind. A deep well breathes cold even in August. And she spoke down into it in the Gaelic her grandmother had given her. She did not ask to be rescued. She asked for a sharpening, a weight added to her wit. There's a difference, and the Lady of the Wells is particular about the difference. She's no comfort goddess, that one. She answers the askers who've already rolled up their sleeves. The water trembled down in the dark, and there was no wind that night to tremble it. Come morning, the boy was sick, retching in the dust, skin gone dry as paper, eyes rimmed red, as if his own thirst had turned in him like milk. The others eyed the well sideways, and Dunmore said it was the heat, and nobody believed him, including Dunmore. Now, mark what she did, because it matters to everything after. She brought that boy water from her kitchen barrel, and she sat with him on the porch step, and she nursed him 2 days, like he was her own. And on the second evening, she put him up on his horse herself and said, "Go home to your mother, if you've got one, and if you haven't, go find the grave, and apologize to it." And he went. First of the 7, the only one she sent gentle. The others did the sums on the situation later on, that's for sure. The first trial, the riddle. She set her trials in the bone-dry dark, one for each weakness she'd seen at her supper table. That's the old pattern, 3 trials, and she kept to it the way her grandmother's people always kept to it, because the pattern is half the power. The first she set for Peck, the watcher, because a man who prides himself on being smart in silence is a man begging to be smart out loud. She caught him at the well at midday and made him an offer. Answer her a riddle, and she'd tell him plain what she'd whispered down the well that first night. He agreed before she'd finished. Men like Peck agree to anything that looks like it favors them, having never once in their lives walked round a bargain to see its backside. "What drinks without a mouth?" she asked him. "Gives life to dust and deepens the more you take from it?" He said rain. He said roots. He said the earth itself. Each answer quicker than the last, and each one wrong the same way. Surface answers, from a man who'd learned to move fast and call it thinking. And when she shook her head the 3rd time, his pride did the rest, exactly as she'd known it would. He slapped the well stone and said the answer was the well itself, and he'd go down the rope and prove it. Prove the water was giving out, prove her riddle was a cheat, and her well was dying like every other well in the valley. She never asked him to. She said, "The rope is old," and he said, "Old rope held better men than her." And over the lip he went on his own 2 hands. It was old rope. It was a dry country, where fiber goes brittle and wood goes to powder, and any man who'd ever worked a well would have known it. And Peck had never worked anything he could send another man down instead. The snap came sharp as a shot. He plunged, came up choking on water and mud and his own astonishment, and clawed out over the stone with his hands torn and one knee twisted, so he dragged it ever after. "The answer is patience," she told him, while he sat shaking in the dust. "Patience drinks without a mouth. Patience makes dead ground live, and the more of it you spend, the deeper it runs. You've none, and that's why the well threw you back." He was gone by supper, dragging that leg. 2nd of the 7. The second trial, the feast. The second trial was a meal. Some say she took down her grandmother's tin from the high shelf. Every Hebridean kitchen has a tin like it, and rubbed certain dried things into the salt on the meat. She fed the 5 that were left, and she fed them well. Good bread with a hard crust, salted meat, beans gone soft and sweet with onion, and they ate like hungry men, and then the night went to work on them. There was one called Harlan among the 4 followers, and the story goes inside him for a spell, so we'll go too. He woke somewhere past 2 in the morning, the hour when a man's mind is loosest on its rope, and his thoughts were loud. Not strange, loud. Every mean thing he had ever done was standing in a line in the dark, waiting its turn, and each one had a name and a face attached, and he found he could not make the line move faster, nor look away from the front of it. There was a woman in a doorway in Abilene. There was a man he'd left afoot in the nations with 2 swallows in his canteen. There was his own brother. Harlan lay in his bedroll under a sky with too many stars and heard his whole ledger read back to him in his own voice. And he understood, in the way you only understand things at that hour, that he had been running not from any law, but from exactly this: a quiet night, a full belly, and nothing between him and himself. He got up and paced the yard till dawn. The woman in the house heard his boots going back and forth, and let him walk. And when the light came up, Coates was gone. Not fled. His horse stood at the fence and his rifle lay by his bedroll. He'd just gone, by some road that leaves no footprints, and all that marked his going was his boots, set side by side, neat as Sunday, at the lip of the well. Nobody ever found Coates. Nobody ever explained the boots. I won't either. Third of the 7, and the count from here gets easy, because after those boots, the 4 that remained were spending most of their thinking on the horizon. The third trial. The mirror. She kept a mirror that had been her mother's and her mother's mother's before that. Bronze-backed, island work. The frame cut with a running knot that has no beginning and no end. It had crossed the ocean wrapped in wool and stayed wrapped in the bottom of the cedar chest, because there are things you don't live with daily. On the third evening she carried it to the well and lowered it on its chain till the glass lay just at the waterline, face up. Then she called the men over, said she needed eyes on the water, said the reflection would show mineral stain if they looked careful. It was a thin excuse and it didn't need to be thicker. Men will always come look down a dark hole. It's one of the oldest things about them. Now, what that glass shows, lying on deep water, my grandmother would only say it the one way. The well remembers everything that's passed through it, and the mirror remembers every face that's looked in it, and the two rememberings together make a reflection of a different order. You don't see the face you shave, you see the face you've earned. Harlan looked first, being already half hollowed out from his long night, and whatever met him down there finished the job. He rode off crying like a boy and left his hat. The second man looked a long while, straightened up gray as ash, walked one big circle in the yard like he was hunting a door in open ground, and then packed his kit with terrible carefulness and rode north. The third looked, laughed once, an ugly bark, looked again, and stopped laughing for what I'd wager was the rest of his life. He didn't pack at all. 4th, 5th, and 6th of the 7, which left Dunmore. He came to the well himself at dusk, no invitation. She was on the porch and she let him go. He stood over that water with the mirror still lying on it and the last light going long and gold, and he did not bend his neck. A long while he stood, hat on, spine straight, looking at the horizon, the well frame, her fence line, anywhere but down. And that, said the woman who told my mother, was the plainest confession of the lot. The other men hadn't known what they'd see. Dunmore knew. A man only refuses the glass when he's already carrying the picture. He walked to the porch. He set his rifle against the rail. He took her kitchen knife out of his coat, she hadn't known he'd had it, and laid it down flat. Last he unholstered the pistol she'd been watching for 3 days, held it a moment, like a man weighing the whole of a life by the heft of one object, and set it in the dust at the foot of the step. "You're a strange woman," he said. It didn't come out like an accusation. It came out like a man admitting the weather. "I'm a woman on her own land who was treated inhospitably," she said, and answered it with what was to hand. "There's nothing strange in that. You made it strange by never once imagining what ordinary looks like when it's had enough." He couldn't hold her eye, and he didn't try long. He rode off crooked into the red distance, and that was the 7th of the 7, and the yard was hers again. And she went inside and sat down at her own table and put her face in her hands, not weeping, just setting down a weight she'd carried so long she'd stopped feeling the strap of it. That night she woke, and she was sitting at her table, and across from her sat a woman who was a woman the way deep water is a liquid. True enough, and missing most of it. Old and not old. Eyes the color of water standing in stone. And on the table between them, a clay cup, sweating cold in the middle of a drought summer night, which in that country was the greatest wonder of the whole tale. "You called," the lady said in the old Gaelic, the grandmother's Gaelic. You did not ask for rescue. I know what I'm capable of, said Katrina. I didn't need more capability. I needed the clear sight that comes when the fear's been set aside. You gave me that at the well, and I'm grateful. And the lady looked at her a long time and then said the words, This story exists to carry, so hear them right. You used what you were given wisely. The riddle was yours. The feast was yours. The mirror was your own grandmother's, and it knew your voice already. You did not need me. You needed to know you did not need me. Is there a difference? All the difference in the world. The woman who needs rescuing and the woman who needs to know she doesn't. Only one of them is still standing when the next 7 ride in. She pushed the cup across. You have reclaimed what was stolen. So long as your wit stays sharp and your patience runs deep, this well will not fail you. Tend it as you've tended it. Speak to it as you've spoken. It knows your voice, and it will answer. Katrina drank. The water was cold, the way deep water is cold. Not the cold of nothing, but the cold of something that has kept its own counsel in the dark a long, long time. And then the room was just a room, and the door was still bolted, and the east window was going gray. The drought didn't break all at once. That's not how the lady works, and it's not how droughts work either. But the well ran higher from that morning. A hand's width higher, measured and sworn to. And it ran all that summer and the winter after. And the next spring there came 4 days of steady, reasonable rain, which she accepted the way she accepted all good things, with a nod and a bucket. The sheriff never turned up, and I told you I wouldn't explain it, and I won't. The boots at the well were never explained either. The pistol Dunmore left she cleaned and oiled and put in the cedar chest. Not a trophy, my mother always said at this part, a receipt. The one the women keep, handed hand to hand like the mirror itself. Says she was neither. She was a woman who asked the right question in the right dark, listened hard to the answer, and did the work that stood in front of her. In that country, in that time, that was legend enough.